In the video that you saw about Vacation Bible School, hands were prominently featured. I don't know if you noticed that, but there were children holding hands with each other. There were leaders walking, holding the hands of children as they went. Children were using their hands in worship to clap and to do gestures. And I want to speak with you today about something very personal, and that is your hands. Hands are fascinating, really. They're capable of acts of intricate and amazing dexterity, such as performing surgery, even surgery on hands themselves, or playing a musical instrument. They're capable of acts of great force and power, like lifting objects that weigh hundreds of pounds, or throwing objects great distances with power and force. They can be used to deliver a violent blow or for the most gentle caress. They are used for more purposes and in more ways than you can imagine. Now, one of the first things we're told when we're little children is, wash your hands before you eat. As an adult, we're reminded all the time of the importance of washing our hands to prevent the spread of germs and illness and disease, and we've got our little hand sanitizer things all around the building just for that. But hands can be used for the earthiest of tasks, like changing a diaper or picking up after your dog. Or they can be used for the most sacred of purposes, like receiving the bread and the cup that reminds us of Jesus' sacrifice on the cross on our behalf. There's a saying, I know it like the back of my hand. You ever heard that one before? Well, how well do you know your hands really? Without looking, don't look down now. Can you picture your hands? What do they look like? Could you draw them? Where are the freckles? Where are the scars? Where are the calluses? For some of us, it's which joints are swollen. For others, it's which finger is going off in a different direction that it's not supposed to go, and it didn't used to do that. Okay, I want you to take a look at your hands now. So I don't want to see your eyes. I don't want to see you looking at me. Look at your hands. Now, when you looked at your hands, be thinking, did you look at the back of your hands or your palms? What do you see when you look at your hands? Think of all the things your hands have held throughout your lifetime. Think of the people who have touched your hands throughout the years of your life. Think of your grandparents holding your hands. For some of us, many years ago. For some of us, it's this morning. Think of grandchildren who held your hand as you crossed the street or walked on the beach. Think of shaking the hand of someone who turned out to be one of your closest friends. Think of holding the hand of someone you were growing to love, and remember the electricity that flowed through your body and made your heart just pound. Can you imagine even a little of the emotion, the playfulness, the love, the friendship, the comfort that your hands have conveyed to other people through the years? Try to picture how your hands have grown and changed. Some of you have a little one with you. Look at how little their hands are. It's amazing, isn't it? They're so small. Some of you, if you're like me, can think about how hard it would be for you to speak without using your hands. Okay, now I want you to close your hands and make a fist. Make as hard a fist as you can. Now, when you do that, can you feel your muscles tighten going down your arm? Can you feel that? Keep them in a fist. When do you make a fist? We do when we're angry, when we're mad, when we're scared, when we feel threatened, when we want to hold on to something and not lose our grip. Now, in baseball, you knew there'd be a baseball thing talking about hands. In baseball, you don't want to hold the bat too tightly. Because if you hold the bat too tightly, your arms tense up, and then you can't extend through your swing, which is very important. And I had a coach tell me that if your knuckles were white, if you could see white on your knuckles when you were hitting, you were holding onto the bat too tightly. You needed to move your fingers and make sure your grip was loose. Sometimes in life, we hold on too tightly. And we live with white knuckles, and we wonder why we feel tense and uptight all the time. Now, a few people here may remember a rock song from the 1980s by a group called 38 Special. Have you remember that song? It said, so hold on loosely, but don't let go. If you cling too tightly, you're going to lose control. Do you still have your hands in a fist? There you go. Thanks for listening. One person's paying attention to what I'm asking you to do. If you kept your hands in a fist all that time, you might find that your arms are actually starting to get tired. Because if you keep your hands in a fist constantly, eventually, no matter how fit you are, your arms will start to get tired. Because your hands naturally want to relax. So if you haven't already, open your hands now. Open your hands. You can relax a little bit. Stretch your hands out as far as you can. As far as you can. Now, can you feel the muscles in your forearm and even the back of your hand? Can you feel that working? Right? Now, if I asked you to do this for about 25 minutes or so, how would that go? This also takes energy, doesn't it? It gets tiring. What is the most relaxing way for your hands to be? It's not stretched to the max, and it's not closed in a fist. The most relaxed position for our hands is to be open in a position in which we could receive something or give something without holding on too tightly. Listen to what Deuteronomy chapter 15 has to say about our hands and how we use them, particularly with regard to our neighbors. It says, if there is among you anyone in need, a member of your community in any of your towns within the land that the Lord your God is giving you, do not be hard-hearted or tight-fisted toward your needy neighbor. You should rather open your hand, willingly lending enough to meet the need, whatever it may be. Be careful that you do not entertain a mean thought, thinking, the seventh year, the year of remission, is near, and therefore view your needy neighbor with hostility and give nothing. Your neighbor might cry out to the Lord against you, and you would incur guilt. Give liberally and ungrudgingly when you do so, for on this account the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and in all that you undertake. Since there will never cease to be some in need on the earth, I therefore command you, open your hand to the poor and needy neighbor in your land. Now, this wonderful passage from Deuteronomy contrasts two different ways of living, being open-handed or tight-fisted. Now, it's really difficult to reach out to another person with your hand in a fist, right? No one in a cliffhanger scene at the climax of a movie says, "Here, grab my fist." That never happens, right? It's always, grab my hand. Now, we can be tight-fisted or open-handed in every aspect of our life. It's not just in regard to giving of our financial resources to the poor and those in need, which is what this passage is about and what we often think of first. Life, love, and time. Life, love, and time are three of our greatest gifts, and we are all given them, though not all in the same measure. And we can either cling to those things with our hands closed tightly, or we can live with open hands and share our life, our love, and our time. Joyce Rupp wrote, "A generous heart freely gives and can live without some of the material things we think we so desperately need. A generous heart is also one that can give freely of the greater non-material gifts, such as compassion, understanding, patience, and forgiveness. And God knows we need more of those four things in the world in which we live: compassion, understanding, patience, and forgiveness. Almost any story of Jesus in the Gospels portrays him as living with open hands. And he often reaches out his hands to heal and to bless other people. In Mark chapter 3, for example, beginning at verse 1, there's this story. Again, Jesus entered the synagogue, and there was a man there who had a withered hand. They watched him to see whether he would cure him on the Sabbath so that they might accuse him. And he said to the man who had the withered hand, "Come forward." Then he said to them, "Is it lawful to do good or harm on the Sabbath, to save life or to kill?" But they were silent. He looked around at them with anger. He was grieved at their hardness of heart and said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out and immediately conspired with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. This incident starkly displays the difference between living with hands that are open to help, to heal, to share, and to bless, as Jesus does, and hands that are closed and hard. Jesus enters the synagogue, and he sees this man with a withered hand and immediately says to him, "Come forward." Think for a moment about all the things you would do and you've done with your hands that you may have thought about at the beginning of the sermon. Just think how hard it would have been to get dressed this morning without the use of your hands. And this man in the gospel story hasn't been able to do any of those things we're able to do, at least for who knows how long. And Jesus engages with this man. And that's something we can do if we live with an open heart and open hands. We can actually engage with people and see them as people. Whether it's a person behind the checkout at the grocery store or the donut shop, whether it's even treating the pharmacist like a real human being and not just a cog in a machine to serve us. We can live with an open heart that beats with the thought that virtually every person we encounter in life every day is carrying around heartache, pain, grief, worry, fear, anxiety that we often know nothing about. Just assume everyone you meet has a story about something. And remembering that can help us to live with open hands and an open heart that gives freely of our life, our love, our time, and our resources. Or the other choice is we can be like the Pharisees, who sit back and see someone in need and don't lift a finger to help and then respond with rage and anger when Jesus does. And part of why they're so angry is they are clinging so tightly to what tradition tells them that they're missing what God is doing right in the present moment, right in front of them. From the Pharaoh way back in the story of the Exodus to this story in the Gospels, there is almost nothing that makes God angrier than hardness of heart and hands. This is one of the few passages in the Gospels where we're told Jesus got angry. He looked at them in anger, grieved at their hardness of heart. It's just a physiological fact. You can't reach as far with your hand closed in a fist. You can reach farther if your hands are open, right? You can't receive if your hands are closed. And that's why God calls us to live with open hands. How are we going to receive what God has for us if we aren't in a position to get it? One of the things I love about our church that Bob referenced in his sharing this morning is that I think we're a church that strives to live with open hands. And throughout the year at BBC, you see people's hearts and hands opened as they volunteer and share in so many ways. From all the folks who work to make Vacation Bible School happen, as we give to support our missionaries, as dozens and dozens and dozens of people work on the holiday fair to bless others in need, as we put together shoe boxes for Operation Christmas Child, as we prepare meals for folks in Hyannis, in Orleans, or a meal here for our business leaders and the folks who are leaders in our community, as we pick up tools with our hands and work at Habitat for Humanity sites. There are all ways that we live and share with open hands and open hearts, as the Bible teaches us. So this passage from Deuteronomy, really in a sense, is teaching us to live our lives in a way where we're not cheap. Now, I don't know about you, but I never like it when I feel like someone is being cheap with me. It just rubs me the wrong way. And that's part of why it's not good for me to go to the grocery store. Because it's driving me up the wall how packaging's getting bigger and the food's getting smaller. You know what I mean? I mean, you buy granola bars, and the wrapper for the granola bar is this long, and the granola bar is this long. Or you buy tuna, and now tuna is smaller, and they keep pushing up the bottom of the ice cream container, and there's less and less ice cream in there. I mean, obviously, you've noticed this, right? I mean, it's a conspiracy. It's really ticks me off. It's just not right. And what about cereal? You know, you open a brand new cereal bag, right? You're like, where's the food? It's like 2/3 full, right? It's crazy. And they always have that little tiny disclaimer on the box, you know, sold by weight, not by volume. And yeah, right. I mean, if you're only going to give me this much cereal, just give me a box that's this big. It'd fit easier in my cabinet, wouldn't take as much space, wouldn't waste stuff. They're all out there just trying to deceive us. You know, why can't I buy a box of cereal that's full? I want someone to get on that. But when I get frustrated with all that sort of stuff, then sometimes in a more reflective moment, I'll think to myself, when God opens the cereal box of my life, how full does God find it? You know? Am I living with an open heart and with open hands? Am I filled with God's Spirit? You know, because it doesn't matter how tightly we cling to things in life. We're not taking anything with us. I've only heard of one person who was allowed to take something with them when they died. That's kind of an old story. A guy pleaded with God to be able to take something with him when he died, and God finally got so sick of hearing it, God said, sure, you can take one suitcase. And so when the guy died, he's standing at the gates of heaven, and St. Peter's checking him in, and the guy's got a suitcase. And St. Peter's never seen this. He's, you know, what's with a suitcase? You can't bring anything in here. And the man insisted he had God's permission. And so St. Peter looked him up on his smartphone there, found the guy, and sure enough, there was a notation he could bring in a suitcase. And St. Peter said, I've never seen this before. Do you mind showing me what you're bringing? And the guy says, sure. He puts down the suitcase and he opens it up, and there's gold bars. And St. Peter looks at him, incredulous, and said, you could bring anything into heaven and you brought paving stones? Paving stones? You could have brought anything and you brought paving stones? Because it talks about how in heaven the streets will be paved with gold. Because, now, there's a couple different ways of interpreting that. But part of how I interpret that is something that we on earth treat as the most valuable thing in the world, in the eyes of God, is so worthless compared to the value of one human being, one soul, that up there it's just a building material that you float over or walk on, depending on our mode of transportation. St. Anthony wrote many, many years ago, some of those who stop in inns are given beds, while others, having no beds, stretch themselves on the floor and sleep as soundly as those in beds. Now, we're so soft, we probably say, I don't know that I'd sleep as soundly on the floor as if I was in a bed, but St. Anthony was a saint, and he was rigorous, so, just take that in context. In the morning, when the night is over, all alike get up and leave the inn, carrying with them only their own belongings. It is the same with those who tread the path of this life, both those who have lived in modest circumstances and those who have had wealth and fame. Leave this life like an inn, taking with them no worldly comfort or riches, but only what they have done in this life, whether it be good or bad. All that we can take with us is that which we have given away. Jesus lived with open hands, reaching out, healing, touching, blessing, comforting, embracing, and even in his death on the cross, he died with open hands, reaching out to all of us. There's a lovely little book called Hands of My Father, a hearing boy, his deaf parents, and the language of love. And in it, Myron Uhlberg writes about growing up in New York City in the 1930s and 40s. And he grew up with two deaf parents. He wrote, "From the time I was a small child, I was struck by how often my father would hold me for no reason I could understand. On my block, this was quite noticeable, even to a young kid like me. Men in that time had the socially accepted role of breadwinner. They were not the nurturers of our young lives. That was reserved for our mother. But that was not the case with my father. At the end of his workday, he would drop to his knees when he saw me, hold me closely as if I had been lost and then found. After that first embrace, he would hold me at arm's length, looking me over, long and deep. And on his face, I would detect a look of mild surprise, a look I could never decipher. No signs were exchanged between us. All that I needed to understand how much my father loved me was to feel his arms around me. He spoke, and the language I heard was the language of touch." Friends, God is like that. God is like a loving father who drops to his knee, looks deeply into our eyes as if we had been lost and then found. And all you need to understand about how much God loves you is to know that divine loving arms long to wrap around you and hold you close. For my closing prayer today, would you please open your hands and rest them on your legs with your palms facing up, open to receive as I pray. Please pray with me. Giving God, help us to picture in our hands the wealth of gifts you have given to us, gifts of love and people and opportunities. Help us to hold them loosely and shape our hearts in such a way that we can live with open hands and freely share of your gifts without fear, worry, or anxiety. Help us to reflect on the people in our life who are special gifts to us, who have opened their hands and their hearts to us in love. And as we see their faces, as we think of how special they are to us, enable us to hear and believe that you want us to be that kind of person for others. And may we always remember, no one ever becomes poor by living and giving with open hearts and open hands. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.